Okay. So there's a few other things we can do with the numpad in terms of altering our perspective and our viewpoint. So I showed you, again, 1 for front view, 3 for side, and 7 for top. If you want to look at the opposite of that, you can hit 1 for front and control 1 for the back perspective. You can hit 3 for the right perspective or control 3 for the left perspective, 7 for the top, and then control 7 for the bottom perspective. And that should give you the basic commands of how to actually get those different perspectives. Another important feature of three-dimensional viewing is to actually kind of create an artificial perspective, which is orthogonal versus just perspective view. And if you hit the 5 button, the 5 key, then the numpad or the top of the keyboard, you'll notice that this kind of strange distortion is going on. What this is that when you're in what's called perspective view, and you should show you up in the upper left-hand corner what that is. When you're in perspective view, actually what's going on is you actually have what's called a vanishing point. So if you've ever done two-dimensional drawings of three-dimensional scenes or landscapes or so forth, you're probably familiar with the concept of a vanishing point, which is as parallel lines drift off into the distance, they actually tend to converge upon some point in some indefinite distance away from you. So that's what you see when you're in the perspective view. When you're in our orthogonal view, which you get by toggling with the 5 key, I'm just going to shift to the top with hitting 7. When you're in orthogonal view, everything is parallel. All parallel lines stay parallel regardless of distance from you. So it can actually maybe throw off the usual perspective you'd have of objects being farther away and being smaller and so forth. So it really it creates the effect that regardless of how far away an object is, it's going to look just as big as it normally does. But when then you start rotating your scene around by orbiting, if it's far away, it's just going to fly out of the scene. So a lot of times I like to just stay in the orthographic perspective. And that becomes really useful when you're trying to model off of images, which I can show you in a little bit, in which we can actually place in the background of our scene an image, like a photograph or a cartoon or whatever you want, that you can actually trace the object in the background with. And when you have orthographic perspective, you actually minimize the amount of distortion that you're going to create by having having things in kind of with a vanishing point that can really distort your modeling when you're trying to shift from different perspectives. Okay. So just to finish off what the function of the number keys are, again, we have 1, 3, and 7 for front, right, and top view. If we select 2 and 8, which if you would see a numpad, are actually at the bottom and the center bottom and the center top of the numpad, 2 and 8 actually allow you to successfully rotate your scene along the x-axis of your view. So you're actually rotating it essentially up and down. So 2 and 8 will allow you to do that. Alternatively, 4 and 6, which would be at the left or the right side of the numpad, allow you to shift your viewpoint along the y-axis of your viewing plane so that we can see the view, we can rotate around our object just like this. Okay. So the one last number on the numpad or the keyboard, top of the keyboard that we want to cover is the 0 key. This is a little bit special from the others. What happens is if you hit the 0 key, you should pull up the camera view perspective. Now this should give you exactly what you intend to see when you actually are creating a rendered image or a rendered animation. So at any point in the creation of your scene, if you hit the 0 key, you can get a feeling for what your camera is intending to observe based on the placement of the objects. You can make sure that everything is in the scene that you want to be there and it's in the appropriate place. And you can also zoom in and out with this scene. If you try, and you can also pan, although your orbiting is fixed. If you try to orbit, you'll pop right out of the camera perspective. So that's how we get to camera perspective. And of course, if you do an image, you'll see exactly what you see through the camera window. Okay. Okay, 13 minutes. So, all right, so let's talk about, let's get out of camera view and just get back into our perspective, orthographic perspective view here in the 3D object, 3D view window. Now, let's talk about just manipulating the objects. We haven't talked about that. So you can actually move the objects around. Now, what you've probably noticed is while I'm talking, there's this kind of colorful blue, red, green, three-dimensional axis kind of floating here around the object. And you'll also notice that there's just a red line through this kind of grid and a green line through this grid. And that gives us an indication of the x, y, and z dimensions of our 3D scene. You can also look at the bottom left corner and see this axis here. And that's always, as you orbit around your scene, it's kind of giving you a sense as to which direction each core axis is pointing, depending on your viewpoint. And of course, if you look in one of your orthogonal views, like front, you'll just see zx. If you hit 3 for right side, you'll see zy, and 7, you'll see xy. So xy is really the flat plane, and z is really up and down. Okay. Now, so getting to this little colorful guy that's just hanging out right here on our cube, this is called a transform manipulator. So there's just like there are 3 basic ways of manipulating your scene. As I said, there's orbiting, panning, and zooming. There's essentially 3 basic ways that we can manipulate any given object in our scene in 3 dimensions. And that is translate, rotate, and scale. Okay. And of course, with many things in Blender, there's multiple ways to do just about anything that you want to do. You just figure out all the options and choose your favorite. So with the transform manipulator, they make it pretty simple to just move this object around in different, along certain axes. So one way is to, say, grab the little green arrowhead on the transform manipulator, and you'll notice that you can start just dragging the object right along the x-axis, or sorry, the y-axis. So green represents y-axis, red, x, z, blue. If we grab that little arrow, we can move it fixed along the y-axis, or we can grab the red arrow and move it fixed along the x-axis, grab the blue arrow and move it fixed along the z-axis. Now, that's great if you want to do translation, but what if you want to, say, scale or rotate? So if you come down here to the bottom of your 3D window, you should see this little panel here that has, you see an arrow, a curve, and a little block-ended line segment. And then you see the kind of XYZ, red, green, blue symbol right there. So right now we have it selected on the translate manipulator mode, and we want to come over to the rotate manipulator mode. So select on the little arc, and I'll zoom back out. Now we'll notice that the transform manipulator is turned into a series of 3 orthogonal circles, essentially. And again, this represents x, y, and z axis according to the color. So if you grab the red circle and you start manipulating, you're going to actually rotate your object along the x-axis. If you grab the green circle, you're going to rotate along the y-axis. And if you grab the blue circle, you rotate along the z-axis. Okay, so now what if you want to manipulate the scale or the size of the object in different dimensions? Now we can switch over to the scale manipulator mode. Click on this button at the bottom here. I'll zoom out. Now we can scale the object in different dimensions. So if we grab the green little box, we can scale in the y dimension. And we can make this as long along the y dimension that we'd like. We can grab the x, and we can scale along the x dimension. And grab the blue box and scale along the z dimension. It looks a little strange, and I think one of the things is that this is actually scaling along its local axes, which I can explain a little bit later. And if you ever are manipulating an object in your 3D scene and you're not satisfied, you want to just bump it back to the way it was when you first added it to your scene, you can do a clearing operation, which allows you to clear your rotation, your scaling, and your translation, your rotation, and your scaling. And we do this by using certain shortcut keys. Now, the shortcut key combinations for doing these three basic operations are S, R, and G for scale, rotate, and grab. If we were to hit G right now, we could actually just start moving our object in the two-dimensional plane of our view plane. That's an important point to remember. We can also hit S to scale, and it just scales by all dimensions. And we can hit R to rotate. And again, that rotates in the axis orthogonal to your view plane, which is also very important to recognize. If at any point you're manipulating an object, by hitting the, say, S key in this case, and you're manipulating it, and you go, wait a minute, I didn't mean to do that, I don't want to do that, you can right-click or use two fingers on your trackpad if you're using a MacBook Pro. Whatever the right-click option is for you, do that, and you'll actually cancel out of the transformation that you were just doing. Now, just getting back to the concept of clearing functionality, if you, as I said, if you look at this object and you go, that's really ugly, so I want to put it back to being the standard cube that we had to start with. So then we can clear the scale, rotation, and translation by using the SRG keys, which are the keystrokes to do scale, rotate, and grab. But now hit Alt first. So now if we hit Alt-S, well, we change the scaling, so the scaling comes back to what it was when we started. If we hit Alt-R, we'll change the rotation back to the orientation it was at the beginning. And if we hit Alt-G, we'll clear the location, and we'll come back to the original location of the object. Okay.